So I thought I would do a breakdown, like a year in review of my poker results, and then also go through some of the biggest pots I played this year and talk through sort of my thought process in those pots. So um, I'll just start out with just giving a breakdown of the different games I played and different mediums I played them in, and just what my net has been for the year. Um, so kind of made this little spreadsheet, but we have the game type and then the net one, hours played if I have it, and the hourly. So I have an account on Bovada. I started the year with $100. Deposited, started at 1025 Zoom. Got up to 1K there, and then won a couple small tournaments to get my uh, account to the point where I was comfortable playing some 1-2 zone, and eventually I played like a 255 session as well, but haven't really gone back to that. I think I'm playing a little bit over my head. I'm not sure that I'm really profitable there, but I've had a decent result so far, plus 64, 56, 52. Um, this has fluctuated a lot. So I was up to 11K at one point, and then ran it all the way down to 3K, and then back up. So this has been a very volatile number. And so again, I'm not really sure. I'm not really doing a good job of tracking anything, and I'm not really sure if I'm profitable at 1-2 zone. I don't really believe I am. But I've managed to do a decent amount on here, especially through like the small tournaments and smaller stakes cash games. I don't have an hours played or an hourly. So just I have no idea what these are. This number probably wouldn't be very good. Probably somewhere around like $10 or something. I played a lot on this site over the past year. Um, then just some home games. This is a mix of stakes, cash games ranging from like 10 cent, 20 cent, up to 1-2 as well. Um, just kind of went through my Venmo logs and kept track of this. So I'm up about $5,400 in these games this year, which is pretty decent as well. And then casino cash games, 1-2. I haven't played a lot of 1-2, so I have a net of $9 over 9 hours played, which gives me $1 hourly. 1-3 is really where I've been staying at for the most part. I haven't really jumped into 2-5, just because I really haven't felt that comfortable yet. Although I probably should at this point. I mean, I'm doing very well in 1-3, but pretty much every time I go to the casino and try to play 2-5, there's been something happening where they just don't have a spot open. I can jump into 1-3, and I've done decently well at 1-3. And I mainly play at MGM National Harbor and Maryland Live. I think National Harbor sort of plays like a 2-5 anyways, because you can buy in for 500 and people open to 15. Uh, National Harbor is like a little bit less than that. Or sorry, not National Harbor. Maryland Live really plays kind of like almost like a 2-3 game, like in between a 1-3 and a 2-5. But that so far this year, plus 75-25, very good results. I think this is due to one of the pots that I'll go over, and just some pretty ridiculous run good. I also have had some run bad. I've had my fair share of negative variance, but I've been pretty happy with the results here, and I think it's due to, in large part, to just playing very exploitatively against a lot of players, and not really trying to carry over like my 1-2 games too heavily into, or from Bovada, at least 1-2 zone, into these live stakes games, and really just taking advantage of like players who are making big mistakes. But 75-25 over 100.33 hours with an hourly rate of $75 an hour, which is pretty ridiculous. I don't expect this to remain the same. I would expect this to come down quite a bit. But obviously very happy with that. That's a pretty ridiculous result. Almost like that's why am I blanking on this? That's like 25 big blinds in an hour, which is pretty ridiculous. 2-3. I played 1-2-3 game at the Orleans in Vegas. Lost $225 in 3 hours, and profit of negative $75 hourly. And I played 1-5-10 game at the Bellagio during that same Vegas trip where I lost 17-20. Didn't really do much, not a lot of big pots, just like kept bleeding. Some good players in the game, and they put me in some tough spots. And I just didn't, really. I've kind of just had like bluff catchers that I felt like I needed to call against people who are capable, and ended up losing a decent amount here. So minus 1720, 2.5 hours played with an hourly rate of negative $688, which is pretty rough. Live tournaments, I did win, or technically win one. I was the chip leader and we chopped 6 ways, so I guess it's at least a tie for first, a small one at the Orleans. But during that same trip to Vegas, I entered into 5 buy-ins at this Venetian tournament that was like a $400 buy-in. I don't remember what the name of it is, and just played like an aggro whale and just got absolutely demolished by people. So I've had a couple cashes in live tournaments, namely at the Orleans. It was pretty soft, and again the win, but it was a pretty low stakes. It was like $100 buy-in, and I think I cashed for like 1485 or something. But those big losses I bought in 5 times for $400. Didn't know who I thought I was, and then also some other losses contributed to this number. So lost about $1,112. I think tournaments in general are something I need to work on. I mean, shallow stack poker in general is something I'm not like too well versed in, so I'm not too upset with this result, but it's negative $60 an hour. Obviously not profitable there quite yet. But total of plus 16,000, about plus 16,330 for the year mainly, or plus about 16,330, which is, I'm pretty happy with this number. I started playing in about May 2020, and or actually probably after that, like closer to August 2020 or so. Didn't really, I was losing a lot. Didn't really I became profitable in like some home cash games, kind of quickly after that. Actually, I started playing like small stakes cash online like earlier that year. So actually towards the beginning of 2020, but I wasn't taking it too seriously, and started playing in some home games towards August, and then started taking it seriously. Probably became somewhat profitable around 2021, like late 2021. So this year I'm very happy with this number. Like next year, I hope I can kind of step up into 2.5. I think it's about time to do that. I don't really know why I skipped over that and went to 5.10. And then yeah, just continue to increase this number over time. 16K for the year. Again, pretty happy with that number. But next year, trying to grow this a little bit more, maybe closer to like 25 or so. And also, it's not technically the end of the year. We still have a month left, so this could go up slightly, but overall, pretty happy with those results. Okay, so I'll get into the hand review. The first hand, this actually should be 1-2. This is on Bovada 1-2 zone. I messed this up when I put this in originally, but it doesn't make that big of a difference. So just act like this big blind is actually $2. Anyways, and also I don't have the pro version of this app, so I can't, it has to be 9 ring for some reason. So these 3 positions here will fold, but really this is just a 6 ring game. So these don't even exist. These people don't exist actually in this hand. So anyways, we see the under the gun and the low jack open to $6. It's a min, or not a min raise. I was looking at the $3 blind again. 3x, actually not pretty standard in the 1-2 pool. This person with a 3x raise, although we are a little deep, so he's 566 to start the hand. So he's, almost 300 blinds deep to start the hand. This isn't really standard in these pools. People really will raise to 2.5x or min raise to 2x most of the time, especially under the gun. So already this person I don't really think is really the greatest. They're definitely not a reg in 1-2 if they're opening to this size. Now again, since we are a little bit deeper, that could be different, and maybe they do really know what they're doing, but I just don't really see a lot of people open to this size that are that I consider to be like regs in this game. Although this whole pool is anonymous, but this is kind of a tell that somebody isn't really as strong of a player already just from their opening size. We see the hijack fold, the cutoff fold, and it gets to me. I have 4-5 of clubs in the button, on the button, versus the under the gun range. You know, versus under the gun opening range. Anything that's not like higher clubs that are just absolutely going to destroy me. Although we are a little bit deep, you know, this hand still is gonna be pretty decent. I'm not going to do anything fancy, especially against under the gun range, so I just go ahead and flat the button. I'm about $900 to start, so let me get these guys out the way. About $907 to start, so on like, you know, 450 bigs or something like that. I go ahead and flat the button. Small blind gets out of the way, and the big blind completes. And we go 3 ways to a flop. We have 19 in the middle. Flop is ace, queen, deuce, rainbow. And we flop a gut shot with the backdoor clubs. Again, some reverse implied odds because we're so deep with the clubs. So if runner clubs come, I'm not going to be super happy about it because people can. I'm not going to be like fist pump jamming for, you know, 300 blinds or 250 blinds with a low flush. Especially if somebody is like leading into me on a flush completing card. Granted, like they could have like ace X, you know, club bluffs, but and I'll probably have to call off at that point. But anyways, I'm not like looking at this board and being like, oh yeah, I love the backdoor flush draw. It just is another thing to go along with this hand. So already I flop a gut shot, and particularly it's a quote nut shot. So if I turn a 3 here, because the board is a rainbow board, I will have the actual stone nuts. So it's not like if there were 2 hearts on here and then I have to fade the 3 of hearts, particularly to be happy with the turn. Any 3 is going to give me the nuts. So that's something to keep in mind here. So big blind goes ahead and checks, and the under the gun player leads for about, I think, what, like 2/3 pot or 3/4 pot, 1354. This is a pretty dry board, so into 2 players leading like this, and again, he opened to $6. I already think he has a pretty strong hand. There is a small chance that he could have something like in like deuces or ace deuce. It's rare to see people open deuces from another gun, but again, if he's raising to $6 pre-flop, I don't necessarily put that out of his range. So this is kind of already screaming to me that he has a really big hand, which for me is even more incentive to continue in this hand, because if I do hit the nuts, I think it's going to be very hard for him to fold. But a lead for 3/4 into 2 players just tells me I think he's got at least ace jack at a minimum. And I just don't really see this. I think into 2 other players, granted, this is going to hit his range so hard, but we can still have deuces. You know, actually, you know, we still have like gut shots and stuff. So actually, I don't really mind the big sizing here. It does make some sense, but I already am just getting vibes that this guy is pretty strong. If he's leading into 2 people like this, like ace jack at a minimum, I would think he has. I don't think he's just gonna start blasting off with like a random like gut shot like king 10 suited or something he opened. So I just go ahead and flat the 1354. I'm going to get out of the way if the turn doesn't improve me in some way. And we see the big blind continue. So pot's now at about $60. And we bink the stone nuts on a card that brings in a ton of draws as well. So something like 5-6 of hearts that has like some backdoor equity here. 10 jack of hearts as well that has like, you know, a gut shot to the stone cold nuts as well. Those type of hands pick up a ton of equity on this turn but aren't made hands. So this is a really good card because now the board is extremely dynamic and I have the absolute nuts. And, you know, of course, this hand just kind of plays itself. I'm not doing anything crazy here. But we see the big blind check again, and the low jack just bombs it. 42-50, 42, 48, bets 3/4 pot, 42-48 into 59. And I, you know, so I'm thinking, okay, I just want to pile the money in. Um, like at this point, I think he may even have a set. Again, his pre-flop sizing isn't the biggest tell, but some people will just blast off with aces here, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense because they have the board entirely locked up. A hand like queens may go crazy too because we can still have some ace x that call. Like I could still definitely have like ace jack or something, or like ace deuce. But I just, again, if he's leading into two people, I just think he's got, at this point, I think he has ace queen, pocket deuces, pocket queens, or pocket aces. And I have a lot of equity versus those hands, but I'm not susceptible to anything coming out. So, of course, I want to put in a raise now. And there's also a lot of cards that will kill the action on the river. So I go ahead and make it 102.96. I don't really like this raise size in hindsight. I think I should go something more like 160, which would make the SPR a little bit like more reasonable, because then he'd have what, like 140, he'd have like 120 more to call, so he'd have like 380, and there'd be an additional like 120 in here, so it'd be like, we'd be like 325 with like 380 behind, so he'd have just over pot behind on the river. So I think this, in retrospect, this raise size is like too small. I should be going like 4x, like 160, especially for the reasons I just mentioned, that I think he just has a strong hand here, like a really strong hand. So I put in the raise. Love this card. Big blind gets out the way, and we see actually a snap call. So that's a good sign. So we have 265 in the middle. He's got about 443 behind, and we see a beautiful 8 of spades on the river. He checks it to me. And here, I think the draws that I mentioned, like 10 jack of hearts, 5 6 of hearts, mainly the big draws that pick up backdoor equity and aren't made hands, but could be doing the same thing that I'm doing, they're all probably going to want to jam here, because this spot looks kind of like nuts or nothing. I definitely can have some sets like pocket deuces that played the flop that way because it was so dry, and then put in a raise on the turn. I shouldn't really have pocket threes. Maybe could continue with the intention of bluffing some runouts and then just being a set. But he certainly can have aces or queens, so I shouldn't be like I should still jam those. I think I am still gonna jam those, but essentially, like, I'm gonna have some brick draws like king 10 of hearts, 10 jack of hearts, and 5 6 of hearts, something like, even like well, no, 4 5 hearts obviously straight. So those are the main kind of bluffs that I can come up with here. Maybe even like some sort of queen x of hearts, like queen jack of hearts or something like that. Queen 10 of hearts, or queen, yeah, like queen 10, queen jack of hearts, stuff like that. So I'm gonna have some draws that sort of brick here, and I think I'm just going to be pretty polar on this river when those draws bust. So it looks kind of like nuts or nothing. Obviously I should work some sets into a jam as well, but I just put him in for the remaining 440 350, and he snaps it off basically, and does show one of the hands that I did think he could have, which is ace queen. So he flopped top 2, pretty cooler spot for him. Hard to get away, I guess, but I just hard to get away from that hand. I think this is a pretty hard. So this is a cooler situation for him for the most part. And yeah, I don't blame his call. He's not blocking any of the hands I just mentioned where I could have bluffs. So it's not like he called me down with like ace jack of hearts, or just like ace king, like top pair. Is a pretty rough spot to be in. And in this pool, it is anonymous, and people do go crazy sometimes. So don't blame his call at all. But this is at 1-2, and this is a $1,153 pot, which is, what is that? Like close to a 600 big blind pot. So we scoop a massive pot. Obviously very thrilled about that. Okay, so the next hand is at 255. Zone on Bovada again. So again, these 3 players are not really here. This is 6 rings, so it's just the low jack, hijack, cutoff button, your boy in the small blind and the big blind. And so go ahead and get these guys out the way. So we see the under the gun raised to 10. Folds around to me. We are a bit deeper here, so this isn't really like the greatest situation, but I play a three better fold strategy from the small blind. I don't necessarily do this live because I think I have a pretty decent edge post flop, but especially in an anonymous player pool and at one of the higher stakes online, I definitely don't want to be just flatting out of position. I mean, some people may have like low pocket, like pocket pairs that flat here and then suited broadways like this. Maybe even like under the gun versus this range, because this is going to be a pretty strong formation. But I just play a three better fold strategy, so I decided to three bet this time, and I'm going to make it 40, 4x out of position. We see the big blind fold, and the low jack goes ahead and flats. So we're really deep to start this hand. Not that deep in this game. He's just a little bit over 100 blinds. I would expect most of his really good hands to like ace king of clubs, something along those lines, like better flush draws, to put in a 4-bet here. But again, this is a pretty strong formation, so you can see a lot of flatting here from hands that are really strong, particularly like pocket aces trapping. I think small blind's going to squeeze obviously a little bit more than big blind, so this formation isn't as strong as like under the gun versus the big blind. But main point is that he can flat a lot of hands here that are actually pretty strong, including like ace king offsuit, stuff like that, like ace queen off. So we do see him flat, which isn't that surprising. And we go to a flop that is just massive. And actually, this isn't one of the videos I posted, but this is a massive flop. Queen 6-8, 2 clubs. So my thought process here is like, yes, it's a 3-bet pot, and typically in 3-bet pots, you don't have to go super massive on as a bet. But I had been playing in this pool for a little bit, and I just got the sense that people are very sticky, and a lot of people were doing a lot of like crazy stuff, like 2x overbetting, like really trying to put people in spots. So I just kind of had this sense, and this may not be, again, this probably isn't the best logic. I don't do as much studying as it probably should, but I just had the sense that like if I had pocket aces here and I bet like half pot or more, I'm just going to get floats from a lot of hands, like even like pocket 10s, pocket 9s with a club. Like especially those hands, because like if they hit a club, you know, they can still hit the set and not bring in the flush on their turn. And then even some like overcard combos, but again, we don't want him to have like ace king of clubs. Another hand he can have here is queens, but obviously we block that, so he can really only have one combination of queens. But I figured my hands without a club are gonna want to go pretty decent size here. Maybe not as big as I end up making it, but I end up betting 55 into 85. So again, I don't know that I have the nut advantage on this board. I think he still has a lot of hands that will interact with this. He could have, in some rare occurrence, like pocket 8s. I don't really think pocket 6s is going to 3-bet call, or is going to open call versus a small blind 3-bet. So I don't really have like 6s in his range, and I don't really like give him 8s. So I'm not really too worried about much here. And then obviously we block like queen jack. So, but again, I think I just got the feeling that people were sticky. So in retrospect, I could probably size down here. You know, especially like blocking so much of the board. But we do see a call, so that's good. And we bink the turn. It's the 4 clubs. And for the same reasons I mentioned, I think like a hand, like again, we do block queen X, but if he has like the ace of clubs with a king, or like ace queen off with the with the ace of clubs, which could definitely like call a 3-bet in position from the small blind squeeze. I think that he's going to still have to continue. His pocket pairs like 10s or something with the club, jacks with the club. Sorry, he can't have jacks with the club. 10s with the club. And then again, if he's trapping aces with the club, are going to have to continue. And I got the feeling that people are very sticky. So this is a spot where I typically bet smaller. Like I would typically go something like probably a third pot, like $60, 65. But I just decided to size up, and part of the reason for sizing up here was just because I wanted to get the SPR close to 1 on the river to make the jam a little bit less polar. But honestly, like it's fine because if I do bet small here, I think a polar like jam on the river is fine. Um, like a polarized sizing on the river, like a little bit over bet on the river is fine because I could do that also with some hands that just contain the ace of clubs, like ace king offsuit with the ace of clubs, or like ace king offsuit with the king of clubs, something along those lines. That just completely brick, but want to get hands like top pair to fold or something. So uh, I think a small bet here in retrospect is probably a little bit better. Um, but I do bet large, and I think this is kind of targeting a small range, like just some sort of hand that has like the ace or king of clubs in it. Um, and again, probably I don't really know how well I played this hand, but I do go a decent size to set up a jam on the river. And again, I did get the feeling that people were sticky, and he does call. Now, the river's an interesting card. It's the Eight of Hearts, which honestly is a pretty decent card because, again, I don't really see him having sixes. His pocket eights now, he only has one combination of pocket eights. And he shouldn't really have queens. He can have queens trapping. That's the one hand that like is kind of a concern, but again, that's one combination. So I'm not going to be scared of one combination. So actually this card is pretty good. The only hands we lose to now are like better flushes, which we were already losing to. The problem is that like I don't know what's gonna call me that's worse. So we block like a hand like 10 jack of clubs, like 9 10 of clubs could possibly conceivably be in his range. But I don't know that it's gonna call off on this board even like a low flush. I mean it probably have to, but so it seems like if I jam, I'm just targeting better hands to call. And again, the turn bet, he was getting a decent price with some of those hands that have like a club in them. And then this card, he may convince himself that like we would be kind of scared of the board pair. So bottom line is I don't really know what's going to call me besides like top pair, which we block, kings or aces with a club that just decided to trap pre-flop, and that's small frequency anyways. So it seems like I'm targeting a small range to actually call a river jam, and the better play is just to check and see if he wants to blast off with something. So we go ahead and check, and that's what he does. He does go all in. Not super thrilled at the spot, but I'm definitely not folding, and just snap call. And he shows up with ace king off with the king of clubs that he turned into a bluff. So do like the river check there, and I think I got kind of lucky in this hand the way that I played it. Again, some people are pretty sticky, and it seems like he did have the intention of bluffing off this hand with the flop call, and by the turn it's not the worst call in the world, but yeah, so I got pretty lucky in this hand. Not sure how I played it, but end up scooping a $1,311 pot. Not super big for the stakes, but it is one of the bigger pots I played this year. Okay, on to the next hand. So this hand, we are, again, 6 ring. It's 1-2 zone on Bovada. We start at about $810, and let me go ahead and press next. Because this hand's going to be against the big blind. So he's about 400 big blinds deep to start, and I'm about also 400 big blinds deep. So we see the under the gun fold, hijack folds. I'm gonna make it 5 from the cutoff. Again, we can ignore these spots. The button calls, the small blind folds, and the big blind squeezes to $30. I'm definitely gonna put in a 4 bet here. Again, maybe could trap since we're deep if I was like under the gun. But I decided to put in a 4 bet, and I make it 65. Now, and in hindsight, like since I'm in position, I make it really small here, like just a little bit over 2x. Because we're a little bit deeper, I think that's more incentive for me to 3 bet larger or 4 bet larger here. So probably make it like 85, even something like that. Um, so I'm not really a huge fan of this raise size, but I do decide to go pretty small here, being in position. And the button, I just don't expect him to ever have a hand here, so he's probably going to fold. So it's just going to be me and the big blind. And if anything, this gives him room to potentially 5 bet with some of his hands like kings, in which case I would just flat, and then we'd have a hand that we'd have to traverse post flop. But so I do make it kind of like a min click, and he flats. So pot is 136 going to the flop, ace 3 queen, 2 spades. I am, I mean, he definitely has queens in his range, but that's really the only hand I'm concerned with. Again, eights may be there as well, but eights and queens, really the only hands I'm concerned with. And my aces doesn't contain a spade, so this is a key part of this hand. And yeah, we'll just get into that in a second. But big blind checks. I bet 30, trying to keep in hands like, jacks, tens, nines with a spade, something like that. This is a 4 bet pot, so I don't have to go particularly large, even though the board is kind of wet. Like 10 jack of spades is really just a huge hand he could have, like jack 9 of spades, something like that. But it's not like I don't really have to go too big. I didn't feel like in a 4 bet pot. So I do make it like a little bit under, like close to like 20% pot or something like that. A little bit like 23% pot or something. And we see a check raise. And so a lot of people like deep stack in these 1-2 zone games, like kind of just go crazy. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what he's doing. But when he puts in a check raise here, since we don't have the ace of spades, he has all the ace x of spades, like combo draws. And again, the ones I mentioned, like jack 9 suited, he has ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace king suited even, that could flat a 4 bet out of position. So then he has like king jack suited, all these different, like, he just has so many spade draws. And since we unblock the ace of spades, that makes it even more so that he could just have so many different spade draws that are doing this. Should never really have pocket threes. I don't expect him to have eights that often. And then queens may just flat the flop. Although, because the queen of spades is there, it's a little bit different. Like if this was the 8 of spades, then he could have queens with the spade and not be too concerned about spades coming in. So queens actually could check raise here, but that's the only hand I think he's really repping at this point is queens. That's an actual value hand. And so I'm not too worried. I'm obviously going to call. So I call, pot's at 360, and we see the 10 of hearts on the turn. So all of those different draws that I just mentioned, like ace jack of spades, king jack of spades, the only one that gets in is jack 9 of spades, which again, to the small 4-bet being deep, could conceivably continue. So it's not like that's removed, but now it's like the only hands really here that he has for value, I think, are going to be jack 9 of spades now. That's a made hand. And probably pocket queens. And again, I'm discounting eights and definitely discounting threes. I don't think he should have those a lot. So pocket queens and jack 9 of spades are the only hands that I think are made hands on this turn. He shouldn't never really be check raising tens, so I throw that hand completely out the window. And then again, not having the ace of spades in our hand, I think he has all the different ace x of spades combos that are just going to blast off here, like ace jack of spades, ace king of spades that pick up equity, right? They pick up a gut shot. Even like a hand like ace 10 of spades that now picks up a pair. So all those like Broadway ace x spade combos and like king x of spades combos, like king jack of spades, is now going to be a huge draw. So he bets 192 into 360, a little bit over half pot. And I think like the river is going to be so hard to play. There's so many cards that I'm just not going to have any idea where I'm at. I think the amount of combos he has for bluffs are just way more than any of the value hands. Like I mentioned, jack 9 of spades, and pocket queens are the only value hands I have. That's like one combo, and then like what, like three combos of queens, and then one combo, so four combos versus all those ace-x Broadway like suited spade combos that he has that are still just massive draws on this turn. So I just get it in. I don't think there's another play here, and again, I'm just gonna have no idea where I am on a lot of the rivers, and this is gonna give him an insane price. So he's getting like 395. I think this is incorrect because the pot isn't really here, so I have to subtract like maybe 300 from this. He's getting like 395 to win 800 with some of those huge draws. So I just put him in, and again, like people do kind of like blast off in like these deeper stack pots in this zone game. I've noticed because they don't really think that people like are really that comfortable playing deep stack poker, and so some people who do play often in this pool, I think, will just like be kind of overly aggressive. So even more incentive for me to just put it in. If he has queens, like God bless him. If he somehow has tens, then I just don't know what's going on. And then again, like Jack 9 suited, the only one combo that I'm worried about, but that might not even call a 4-bet. Like it's not going to call full frequency to a 4-bet, certainly. So he does call, and oh, sorry, I only had 45 behind. So he was actually getting a really good price here. He's getting like 395 to win 1100. It's really hard to fold any of those draws. He just has to call off his draws. We see the king of spades on the river. Obviously not a card that we love to see. You can actually see the cards, so I knew I didn't lose here, but I was, if I couldn't see his cards, I wouldn't be thrilled about this card. This completes a lot of those draws that I'm talking about that he has. And yeah, he had king jack offsuit with the jack of spades that just went nuts on the flop, picked up a big open ender on the turn. We blocked we blocked his outs also that he picked up. And yeah, so he ends up just rivering top pair, and we scoop a $1,534 pot at 1-2, which is pretty massive. All right, so on to the biggest hand we played during the year, which is at 1-3 at MGM National Harbor. So this is actually a live game, and we were 9 ways in this hand, but I've labeled a few people here. I don't really remember what was going on. I remember there was some guy in college who was pretty nitty. This guy, I had just been going, he was a pretty big fish. I had just been going back and forth with him and ran up my stack basically just off of him. So a little bit of background. This was a pretty fun game, but this guy called off ace deuce suited for like $400 pre-flop and sucked out against ace king. He literally said, fuck it, I call to a 4-bet that this guy put in. Ended up hitting a deuce on the flop and holding. And then he won another pretty decent pot, and I had just been, he loved to just like he loved to bluff if you check to him. So I had just been like check calling him, making hands against him, and I basically ran up my stack to 1185. So that's why he's labeled as my son here. No hand Harry, this guy wasn't playing anything, and then these two I don't remember. This guy was like a nit recreational player, and then just the big blind, who I just labeled as Spoolius. I don't know what that guy was doing, but we're going to be against Omega Whale. And so a background about this guy: earlier in the session, he 5-bet jammed 6-7 offsuit for $500 effective and sucked out with a straight against somebody's pocket queen. So 6-7 offsuit as a 5-bet jam bluff, and then sucked out. And now he's got a pretty big stack. He says he plays 2-5 and 5-10, and I think I just have the impression that he thinks everybody is scared money, and if he's 5-bet jamming 6-7 offsuit, I'm just that just is gonna play into my decision in his hand so much. Like, I'm not gonna be folding really like a big hand to this guy. So we'll see what happens, but this guy, just as background, he loves to blast off. So this is actually the last hand I was going to play in the session. I was going to leave on my button. I looked down at ace king of diamonds folds around to a Mega Whale who opens to 25 in a 1-3 game. So fantastic. I look down at Ace King suited, definitely putting in a 3-bet. I make it 75. Folds around back to Omega Whale who calls. So pots at 154. We see a beautiful flop, Ace Deuce 7 Rainbow. And Omega Whale leads into us for $125. So I'm just never going anywhere, but I don't really see a lot of incentive to fold. Things I'm thinking about now are just like, again, the 6-7 offsuit hand. I think that he's just knows that I'm deep stack right now, and he plays higher stakes. He just thinks I'm going to be scared money, and I don't really know what he's repping here. If he has deuces or sevens, then just like, I guess screw me. I don't really know what to say. But he's not really repping anything here, and there is some small chance in my mind that he could be like just completely overplaying a hand like Ace Queen or Ace Jack. Thinking that I could have like pocket kings or like, I don't know, like pocket queens, just a high pocket pair, and so trying to put me in like a rough spot. So those are some thoughts I'm having. I don't really know what he's repping. He could be overplaying some ace X, and then I've seen him 5-bet jam 6-7 offsuit, so this bet doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm just gonna flat. I'm not really too concerned. Turn is a 6 of clubs. Brings in a lot of back doors, but doesn't complete any like straights or anything immediately. Obviously, the flop was entirely disconnected, so really like only a 3 or a 5 would have brought in some of those draws, or 3, 4, or 5 would have brought in some draws. But this brings in a ton of like backdoor draws, and just, I mean, he does bring in 6, 7 if for whatever reason he's blasting off with a hand like that. Again, like maybe he has pocket deuces, but I still don't understand the flop lead. He's obviously not thinking about ranges, because the flop is just a much better. This flop just smacks my range in the face. And if anything, if he wanted to play like deep, he could just like check raise the flop. The lead just doesn't really make sense. But we see him blast off 325 into what was it, 404, and I go ahead. I basically, in real time, I'm just thinking like, this guy just has so many bluffs here, like 8, 9. Like, I don't know what he's repping other than particularly set. I'm at the very top of my range, and similar to the last hand, there's going to be a lot of rivers that I just don't really know what's going on. So I basically just snap put him in. I just say all in, and he announces out loud. He says, "Well, I guess I'm beat, but I have to call." So that's a good sign for me. I just roll over my hand, ace king of diamonds. I'm not really like superstitious about the river. If the river comes and I get screwed, then so be it. But like, I don't really know what he has, but now it seems like he just has a massive combo draw. And so he does end up calling off the rest, and the pot's at 2374 at a 1-3 game, so like an 800 big blind pot. River's a 10 of spades. I'm not entirely sure where I'm at, because this card does complete like a hand like 8-9. So I'm not like super thrilled about it, but it does seem like a blank. He looks a bit disgusted, and he flashes 4-5 of clubs. So just completely like, again, I don't think I would really encounter this hand against somebody else. So this is a very particular, like, not necessarily an exploit against somebody. I guess it is pretty much an exploit against somebody, but I'm pretty happy with my jam, and I scoop a $2,400 pot with just top against like a massive aggro whale. So pretty good day overall. But yeah, that was the biggest pot of the year, $2,374 pot at 1-3. So anyways, that wraps up the top 4 hands. Again, top 4 just because I don't really know. I didn't really keep good track of a lot of other pots, so these were just ones that I could actually recall. There may have been some live hands that were a little bit bigger than the ones I went over, but nothing that I could think of immediately. So top 4 hands of the year. Obviously grateful to dodge the entire world on this river and scoop a massive pot. But yeah,